Welcome to the Mavericks podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Terance, a life coach and dear friend. In the beginning, we talk on different psychological perspectives with social media. Throughout the show, we also touch on some of our past experiences and how we've handled them. As we get closer to the end, we begin to touch on confrontation and conflict resolution.
I ain't even lying to you.
Tag me on. Or tag me as a collaborator.
Okay. Do that.
Or I guess you don't do Instagram yet, huh?
I do Instagram.
Oh.
My Instagram following is not as big as my TikTok because I started a new Instagram. So my first one on Instagram is like I have 24,000 people following me on there.
Yeah.
My new IG, I'm building my following because I want to start over. I want to have something completely freshly new, something completely different because who I was in communication at that era of my life post COVID is a lot different than who I am now. And the transition has been different. And I was actually going to delete that account, but I got locked out of it. And then once I was able to get back in it, every time I try to reset the password, it won't let me. So I've been having to email Meta and Facebook and Instagram, since they're all the same freaking company, and be like, why can't I delete my own?
Yeah.
But
It's interesting.
I think I'm going to do away with it altogether. Because it's kind of hard to restructure. Because everybody who followed me at that time was a part of my thoughtful part of my life. Excuse me. My God. That's what happens when you come to somebody's house post-gym. I still have a gym attire. But who I was then is not who I am now. And I don't want that. My grandma used to say, pictures are worth 1,000 words.
You don't want it to leak into your persona now?
I don't. Not that I'm trying to forget who I once was, but I don't want. That person is a different conversation than who I am today.
Mm-hmm.
So although I don't mind sharing a lot of my personal life and how I did things and all of that stuff, because nothing on there is just like inherently bad, but since there was a large part of my life where that community was locked into the unsaved version of me and the less mature version of me, I don't want that. I just don't want that conversation and attachment to who I've become now.
Yeah. It's going to happen. You can't really stop it. I mean, you can try and block it out, but like,
you can try.
You're always going to have people that come back and then are like, oh, you used to do this, you used to do this.
That's true. But when it's a lot of those people that still try to be in your DMs and be like, when you gonna hit, it's like, I'm not. Like, I don't want any part of that large group of people, especially because there was a point in time where I did underwear and sports modeling. So there was a lot of thirst trappage. And those people don't know the difference between, and don't have the respect to say, this isn't who you are anymore. Like, I posted something scriptural based about God. And literally, like, people were like, oh, okay. Under the comment, when are you going to post gym stuff? When are you going to post? And it's just like, I'm not posting anything that's going to be thirst trappish for y'all. Because it's not my life. Like, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
So I feel like there needs to be a detachment. And if people follow to the other side, that's one thing. But I feel like it's too close for comfort. Because the demographic that I'm working toward now is a demographic of people who are healing. I don't want unhealed people to mix in conversation and content with people who are trying to actually heal and who are coming to my platform for information to better themselves. You know, I just feel like it makes the water murky.
I agree. Like, what you're saying makes sense. But I also would say the more they're exposed to it, the more seeds are planted. So it could, I mean, yeah, negative energy tends to be more prevalent than positive energy. But at the same time, if you just keep feeding that positive energy and they're coming back with the negative, they're coming back, which means you're planting some sort of positive seed in them. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep coming back. And if they're not going to adapt to the positivity per se, then they're going to stop coming back. And then you're going to weed out the bad waters, essentially, in any case.
That's true. That is true.
So
that
it's
is
like,
true.
I wouldn't let, like how I think about it, I wouldn't let one negative thing or the possibility of one negative thing keep you from doing positive things for others.
No, that's true. But that was the purpose of the rebranding.
Yeah, the idea behind it, right?
Yeah.
Which is understandable.
Especially as I continue to grow and I have more leaders saying, hey, we feel like God is rearing you into a ministry form of leadership. It's just uncomfortable territory for me. Just to like think about the two. Just being.
Well, I'd say that's a positive sign if you're uncomfortable.
It's comfortable. It could be a positive thing, right?
Yeah.
But if I look at it from, I could say a temptational standpoint. Like
it tempts you to do more stuff?
No. There's a lot. Okay, so I can say like now with where my platform is going, there's a lot that I'm studying and researching to help people with sexual trauma or people who've gone through that particular thing.
Yeah.
I don't want someone who's over sexualizing just even me in a standpoint to come and be able to put other people's progress in a weird place. Like it's gonna happen regardless. Like even on my TikTok account now, it's completely scriptural and biblical based.
Right.
And I still have people that randomly out of the blue that'll just be like, oh, well, because they don't agree with the Christianity standpoint or the Christian standpoint of things and the scriptural based of why God is calling us out of a lot of things from a worldly standpoint. They'll get in there and they'll say whatever they want to say. That's fine. You have those few bugs. But it's a little different when you have people that you are in a following with or a community with that still want ties and access to you in that way and they can't. Like it's just one of those like real fine things that even some of the stuff that people say make me uncomfortable. So how is that going to make somebody else who's coming to my platform for that? You know? Like I think about the other person.
You mean?
Yeah, that's coming for the positivity and the ability to say, I'm trying to separate myself from the world. But you have like worldly people that are purposely like, nope, we're here and we're here for the wrong reasons.
So let me ask you this question. You could restart, right? That's obviously the question that you want to do.
That was the purpose of the...
Which you don't even have access to this account anymore, right?
I have access to it. I can't delete it.
Okay.
So I've been able to log in, but Instagram is like, change your password. Then when I change my password, they don't send the email.
Okay, I got you.
So then I have to send another email. And then it's changing my phone number, change the email, and it still won't let me delete it. So it's something that is on their end.
So, like, again, you have the option to rebrand, which you've already done.
Yeah.
Now, what about you could take that as an opportunity to redirect the people from the other platform, right? Because you restarted.
Yeah.
So you could go in. Can you get into the account?
I can get into it. Like I redirect people to like my TikTok through there. So like I'll post on there, add myself as a creator, and redirect people. But it's just still uncomfortable for me because I'm tagging my new profile with the old profile, which still lets other people who may be disingenuous about supporting me in that way to still have access to the new profile.
Still let you.
Because I've still had some people that have been like on the new profile that's been like, so when are you getting back into underwear modeling? It's like, I'm not. Like that part of my life is over. That was cool from 22 to 26. Past that point, we're done. You're not going to see 30-year-old me doing that.
Yeah.
So it's just like, let's separate the ties and just...
So what if you took that as an opportunity per se? Like, yeah, I understand you don't want the people to come together, but in the part of building a community, you want to prosper change.
Yeah.
And that's why I say, like, you could just go into that profile, whatever, set it up to where it directs them to the new account, like you were talking about,
Yeah.
and then make some content on there that basically points them to, hey, this is the new account. And then if the you're always going to have negative comments. So we can't weed them
You
out.
can't read those out. Yeah, that don't happen.
So you might as well take advantage that there's a following there, and then lead it to where you are now. And then the people who stay are going to stay and they're going to grow. The people who don't stay, they don't need to be there anyways. So that's what I would say. So you can't delete the account. You might as well use the account to help redirect people who do maybe want to change and who are maybe starting out on that journey. You just redirect them, boom, there. And then now they're growing passively just because they're taking in a little bit of information. Yeah, maybe there was wrong intentions by clicking on your old content, but then maybe there's a sliver and then that seed starts to sow and then eventually they're switched over. So it's a possibility. Yeah, there's going to be negative, but we're not going to get rid of negative. The biggest way that you know that you're making a difference is negativity is following, right? There's going to be negative. That Jesus had negativity following him.
Facts.
So why not take advantage of that and have that flowing where you're planting some seeds and then eventually the people who are wanting to grow and who are learning, like, hey, this isn't the right path, maybe this is the right path, then they get transferred over to the account that you're doing now, the branding that you're doing now.
Could be. I've cross promoted like that. It just hasn't worked out in a way that I would have liked. But I mean, it's always something to revisit.
It's always just placing the seeds there, and that's all it is. Because the more you plant those seeds, the more people are gonna take a hold of those seeds and grow, right? Yeah. And some people are gonna be weeds, and they're gonna have to be weeded out. But in the form of content, because it is social media, anyone can consume anything. True. So, like I would, if I had a following from before, I would start planting small things that maybe you can start out soft where it's like not so obvious, but then leading them to this page, and then you're like, this is where growth happens. And you make it to where you catch their attention, and then they're coming here. Not saying deliberately do things to catch their attention. I'm saying like just start planting those little seeds every now and then on that old account. Not like you're doing with your new account, but like maybe once a week you have a new post and something like, oh, all this progress is happening, or something about a really positive thing that's happening on the other channel, and then you're pointing them there. And then eventually that one gets outdated because you're not updating it all the time, and now all of your following
my core followers would be on the new.
Yeah.
Could possibly do that.
So long story short, essentially if you just do the new following, then that's only where you're going to grow. Yeah. If you do that and then also have something on the old following that leads people there, that's extra growth that you're getting until it weeds out and all the bad things stay behind and all the good people are already on the second one. True. So it's like, it's a positive.
I see what you're saying. It's a positive. I feel like it's a double-edged sword though.
So is following Christ.
That's true, but that's something that you're going into for the purpose of knowing that you're going to change, and that you're changing to be closer to Him.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it the same concept though?
It's to a degree, because I know what I'm getting into with Christ. Mm-hmm. Like now, like before it was like, oh my God. Now I know what I'm getting into with Christ. Like I know there's going to be pruning. I know there's going to be a cutting away. But I feel like where the conversation of using the old, like when God tells us He will be a new creature, I want to grow the new creature. I don't want to dwell in who I once was.
So don't look back on it. As long as you're not looking back on it, then I don't see like I don't feel like there's a issue with that.
There's an issue. But it's so much that was connected with that previous account that it's like to have to deal with it. I don't want
to. I think we found the core right there.
It's just like I don't, because it is a reminder of who I was at that point. Especially like one day when I was able to get into it, I just kind of scrolled down and went down like a few years past, like of just DMs. Like I didn't know how many thousands of DMs a person could have over which makes sense. A 9-year period, 8-year period of having an Instagram account. Like, you just don't go back and check sometimes. So I was just scrolling through. And like the messages and the conversations, although I didn't entertain all of them, the ones that I did, it was just like, why? Why?
Like you're
Why?
looking back on what you
Why? And it was just a reminder of like things. But then I also know, like now, I was putting myself in the headspace to read the conversations. And even after I left and was like, that's not even, it's still like, it was like an open door to allow certain other thoughts to come into my mind that I just didn't want to. Yeah. So it's like dealing with that and knowing that if I did keep that, I would have to literally like go through all of those DMs and delete them, block all the inappropriate conversations and people I've attempted or even wanted to date over like a period of time. Mm-hmm. It's just so much heaviness dealing with that account. I just don't want to just like, ugh.
I'm just restarting. I was just saying, like I was pointing out a new.
No, I get what you're saying, like a different perspective of it.
So.
No, and I get that, and I respect that perspective because although I've thought about it before, well, like with me it's a thought, and then it's like, if I don't like it, I move away from it, which is something that God is dealing with me on because there have been a lot of thoughts, especially here recently, that I've been like, oh, okay, maybe, and then I move past it, and He's like, no, child, do this.
Deal with it.
Yeah, like I need you to do this because this is for your growth. Like, and it's like, oh. So I'm learning to deal with those thoughts. But I also know from a mental health standpoint, when putting yourself back in an environment that was unhealthy too soon can do.
Yes, exactly.
And that's where it's kind of like that. I'm not that far removed from the old 32-year-old me that was.
Which, how old are you now?
35.
Okay, so it's a few years.
Yeah, it's been some years, but it's still like, and then even being back here in Austin, I've come in contact with so many people that it's just like, for them to see the new me, it's completely like, they bring up the old conversations of who I was, and it's like, baby, that's not who I am anymore. Like,
say, hey, I'm proud to not be who I was.
Exactly. And it's just like, I'm not that person. And I'm like, oh, It's like, yeah, I'm still your friend in a way, like, but I'm not going out with you. I'm not smoking with you. I'm not drinking with you. I'm not going to any clubs with you. I'm probably not going to hang out around 99.9% of the people that you're still friends with. So if we're going to be friends, we're friends excluded from your group.
Yeah.
And it's just like, even that gets sticky and uncomfortable. So it's just like, ugh. I don't know, but I'm in a weird place.
That's an interesting topic. It's probably good for another day, but that's something that we can dive in mentally because that's an interesting topic to dive into. I said the same thing twice, but
you did, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to reiterate things, but no. So when you just to poke at it, like, what do you mean? Like, what part of that is?
Because there's an internal conflict there with you that can be solved that I believe can be solved by going into it a little bit more. Because what it sounds like is that you're not entirely comfortable with showing off to the older people or the people in your life before that new you is who you are for sure. It's like it seems like there's some sort of internal conflict there.
No, I'm comfortable with showing it because I've been showing it, especially like between TikTok and my new profile for IG.
So why does it make you feel uncomfortable?
Being around certain people in areas, like God said that when a man is delivered and falls back into sin, it's like a dog going back to eat its own vomit. There are certain people that I know just aren't healthy for me. And that's when it gets to that point of like, if you're opening up room for me to even be tempted by the enemy, when I've had to fight to get so far, I'd rather just stay away.
Yeah, then just stay away.
Yeah.
Right, and I agree
so
with
it's
that.
One of those like, what's the fine line and the boundary of where I know how far I can go type deal. Especially when you look at like people in places you moved away from. Like even certain family members, it's just certain family members I'm not going around.
Yeah. No, I mean I do the
It's
same
just
thing.
like, ugh. And it's nothing against them personally.
Yeah.
It's the environment and what they welcome in and the damage that I knew that it did to my life and just the amount of delay that I caused myself by being around those people.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes down to certain things, it's just like I don't want to be so close to where I allow a door to be open
That you closed before.
that I closed before.
Okay.
Especially since I'm still in a healing place.
Yeah. And that's
And
what I
I'm
was.
yeah, it's too close for comfort. Granted, I know that God is not going to allow me to be in a place or a space where I cannot get out of.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we as people put ourselves in places we should not be.
Yeah. So I want to
And
touch
it's
on that a little
it's
bit.
it's that fine line. Like it's just once I start getting that feeling like abort,
Yeah.
it's time for me to move around.
So I want to touch on that just a little bit. Not about, it's nothing to do with you, but
Yeah.
so I want to get to the point where, and this is what I'm like long term, right? Way down the line. I want to get to the point where those kinds of situations, you're able to go into those situations and inspire change in those people instead of, because like you said, you don't want to be tempted, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're in a place of healing now. So now is not probably the best time, which is maybe
For
why
certain things.
right, which is
certain
maybe
things,
why you get to a point of uncomfortability in those situations, because there is still something that you're battling that maybe,
Yeah.
completely. So I want to get to the point in my future, and maybe you too, and like what you're working towards, to where these bad situations that used to happen, now you're inspiring a change in those situations that used to change you.
Yeah.
And that's a hard place to get, I think, but I really think that's possible.
No,
And
it's possible.
so I think that's something that to aspire to be, like further down the line, as you get past that point of, you're solid with who you are, that healing process is done from the old things.
Yeah.
And then you're really just rock solid, like the foundation of God, right? Then you can go, and I won't say go back necessarily in air quotes, but you can be around those kinds of people and be the one that inspires change in them. And I say that because in my not so far past, I was around people who did drink and who did smoke. But because I'm so solid in my foundation, like I know who I am, and I don't drink, I've never smoked, I've never done anything of that sort. I inspired change in a lot of people who did, or who at the time was, because I know who I was, or I knew who I was, correction. And the way that I carried myself and the way that I was influencing people, I would inspire change in them, and I actually helped inspire change in those people to where they were improving their lives, and I was witnessing it, and I had the privilege of witnessing it because it was genuine. And I'm talking in reference to people that I used to work with at an old job of mine, not even 6-8 months ago, right? But I would go out with them, like bars and stuff, and I drank a little bit at the time, but they wanted me around. Yeah, I was fun to be around, especially with a little bit of liquor, but I was always talking about things that were uplifting and not like womanizing, I guess is the right word, or overly, what's the word? Starts with an E. Or I guess overly vulgar, I guess would be a good way. But it was always like a genuine time. It wasn't something that, oh, we're tempting each other to do more and more negative things, or talk to women inappropriately, or do inappropriate things, or start a fight, stuff like that, right? So it was always, I was inspiring change in them, and in my opinion, they're more vulnerable because they had been drinking. So then you can kind of nudge them a little bit more in their understanding. Now, if you drink too much, obviously you're going to forget.
Yeah.
But to a degree, once they're a little bit more vulnerable, you're putting those seeds in, and then it just stays with them. And I mean, some of the guys that I work with, like they've completely changed their lives around. They were doing, they weren't on the worst path, I would say, but they weren't going down a path of righteousness,
Yeah.
I guess. And having me being around them and hearing about their stories, I gave them a new perspective that they hadn't considered.
Mm-hmm.
And offering that new perspective helped plant the seeds that did change their life. Like one of the guys, two of the guys actually, they have their own place now. Then they're sharing a place and they're thriving. Like they used to just kind of struggle by themselves and have to get rides to and from, stuff like that. Now they're building a foundation for themselves that they didn't have before. And I'm not going to say I'm taking full credit for that, but
Mm-hmm.
little bit of seeds that have been sown sprouted growth.
No, absolutely. God tells us that one man plants, another man waters
Mm-hmm.
in form of seeds. So you planting a positive seed in their life definitely has something to do with it.
Yeah, and so that's why I say like maybe right, it's not the right time all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cliche, but whatever, you know. But like you say, yeah, you're uncomfortable right now, but sometime in the future, like maybe that's the goal. And I
Yeah.
say this because my part of my life question, like one of my, and I have it written down on one of these sheets of paper some here. I've got so much papers back there, but um, I want to my question that I want to answer is essentially, how do you reach the people who don't want to be reached, or who don't think they can be reached? Now,
Mm.
that's a hard. I say it's a hard question to answer because maybe you could spit some things out that could maybe make sense. But here's the thing:
Mm-hmm.
Tony Robbins is very, very good at what he does.
Yeah.
But even he doesn't go for people who he can't reach or who don't want to be reached. He goes for people who want to be reached and
Yeah.
who pursue it. So, my life question and my kind of journey, and I think that I can. It's going to be a long time, of course, but I think I can accomplish it. And I don't know why I think I can accomplish it, but it's something that weighs on my mind.
If God put it on your heart, then it's accomplishable.
Right.
God wouldn't give you a thought or an idea or a vision and not be able to make it possible for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But it's a question. Like even the face that you made when I said it is like it's a.
well, no, because it's possible. Because God tells us that prayer changes things. So
Mm-hmm.
if you can't do it physically, then your prayers do something in the spiritual realm that can impact that person. But it's the pursuit and the consistency behind your prayer and the genuineness behind your prayer. And then the willing and the action behind it, to where when you're praying for a person and God says, okay, now I need you to do this for that person. Are you willing to do it no matter what it costs you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I've thought about, like even on the community standpoint. Like a lot of something that I've talked about a lot, parents feel like they can't get to their children or they feel like their children don't listen.
Right.
But it boils down to, are you willing to be the example of what God asked you to be for your children, for them to learn that action to do it? Have you been a trustworthy source for your children? Which is why it's important for us to not just walk or just talk the scriptures or put forth the presence of God. It's important to walk it because people are looking at the actions. And normally when people can trust you, they're willing to take the advice from you. So it's doable. It is also being willing to put yourself out there in a weird way. Like a lot of the stuff that I've had conversations about on TikTok have been direct testimonies of what I've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, I've dealt with that too. I've dealt with that too. However, I also know how far I should go with it because there's still a level of healing that I am doing. Mm-hmm. And like going back to the uncomfortableness that I was talking about, if I know that I'm in a place of healing where I can have a down moment or a bad moment in thought. Like say, I've dealt with depression in the past. Most people who've dealt with depression have moments where they feel depressed, but it's their body chemically responding to circumstances that they're learning to push through. So,
can you explain that in a little bit more detail?
So like, and in not all cases, we go through bouts. Like for me, my dad shut me down emotionally as a child. I never learned to start emotionally regulate until I was 28 years old. I spent the majority of my childhood depressed. I can be completely happy and moving on, like going through my day, and randomly just start to feel like I'm sad. Randomly. And I've been to therapy about it. I've talked to doctors about it, counselors, and they're like, it's just because, in some cases, they say it's medication needed. Some doctors have said it's the repetitiveness of you training yourself because you've lived in that space. Certain conversations, certain phrases bring you back to that place. So, in order for you to stop feeling that cycle of, okay, well, I just kind of feel like I'm having a depressive day, I have to work through it and fight that thought. Okay. So it's one of those things where it's like, I had a conversation with one of the ladies at the gym the other day, and she said something about her brother that made me sad. Mm-hmm. Now, had nothing to do with me. Nothing about the situation really was a sad situation. It was just one of those human life moments that happen. But because I've dealt with those human life moments for the majority of my childhood being depressed, it brought me back to a feeling of being depressed when I really shouldn't have been depressed about that moment. Nothing about it should have been sad. Huh?
What do you mean by human life?
It was a circumstance of, I should say, a human situation, like a simple thing of, oh, him and his girlfriend had an argument and it really made him sad about da da da. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can get it. But it literally, like walking away, I started feeling depressed about that situation. And it was like, why do I feel depressed about somebody, and this dude and his girlfriend, who are happy 99% of the time having a negative argument about something that happens in relationships? People argue about food. Like, it was something so simple as that. Yeah. It was like, why? But after I sat with myself, it was like, no, because I've dealt with those type of moments in my life.
And you have a strong connection to it.
And I had a strong connection to it. But the majority of that aspect of my life, I literally was dealing with depression. Mm-hmm. So it was that simple. And it was like, no, you have no reason to be depressed. You have no reason to be sad. So when I know other aspects in my life, when it comes down to like sexual trauma and things like that, if I know I'm putting myself in an environment that's going to make me uncomfortable in that way, or make me have that feeling, it's only so long I can sit there.
Right.
So that uncomfortableness is like, whoa. But I do know that God doesn't bring you anything. God doesn't bring you out of anything with the expectation of you not helping other people out of it. Mm-hmm. Which is the purpose, like I said earlier, for the separation of that. It is that I have the ability to spark change in people. Weirdly, I can have a conversation with somebody and I'll randomly get, oh, that really helped me. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I'm glad it did. But then when I sit with it at home, it's like, how did that?
Do you voice that when you feel like that?
Do I voice it out loud?
Yeah.
Now I do. Before I didn't. Before I would internalize it. Yeah. Now I say it out loud. That way I can hear it, because if I can be real, I feel like that's incredibly stupid for you to feel like what you said that helped somebody was minuscule or small. It was just something you said. It's like, no. If you said something that helps somebody, that validates your purpose here on earth.
Yeah, but do you notice a difference when you actually speak out after? Like, they say it helps, and then you speak out and it's like, well, I'm glad it helped. Like,
yeah.
And there's a difference between that and then internalizing it.
Yeah.
And that's where that's why I like communication so much. Is because not internalizing. Speaking those small things makes a world of a difference. And I've noticed that just in the last week.
Yeah.
Just saying those small things when something or someone makes you happy, or like they do something you're proud of, right? Or that has an impact on you, right? So if they're saying, essentially like, oh, this really helped me, and then you're taking that information and then you're redirecting it back to me as well. I'm glad I could help you. I'm glad I could provide you some sort of service in some sort of way, right? Those small little comments, it's insane. And just from the little bit that I've noticed, because I've been reading, books about connection and communication. I'm reading a book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that's one of the principles in there. Mm-hmm. But just voicing that little bit, it makes so much of a difference. And I don't want to put a number on it, but I would say the effect that comes out of it is like 80 or 90% of, because and especially if you're leaving the conversation, then they're going to be left with that. It's like, oh, I made an impact on this person, or they really liked what I said, essentially. So like if someone does something really good and you're really, like, it makes you feel good, voicing that is like, I really appreciate that you did that for me, and you didn't have to, right? You just voicing that little bit, and if they're a good person, obviously, and not very like built up, egotistical, whatever, then they're gonna take that and like, oh, I made a difference in this person's life. And it just, especially if you, like I said, if you're leaving the conversation, it sticks with them because it's the last thing that you said.
Yeah.
And I'm learning even something as simple as, oh, you're really pretty, or conversating with someone like that, and just adding those little bits of appreciation in there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do it, but the difference that it makes is always worth it, in my opinion, because it always, even if you're just getting a smile out of them, like it's that little bit of happiness that comes out, the little bit of joy that you see come out of their face or their eyes or whatever you see. I don't know. That's something that I have noticed recently in my pursuit of better communication.
I agree with you on that, because you saying that makes me reflect on the conversation that we first had at the gym, and it was just like, oh, okay. Because you were like, thank you for sharing that. And I was just like, oh, you're welcome. But I normally share. I'm an oversharer.
When was this? But not when I fell down the stairs, no?
It was a time after that. Because you had on the pink shirt with Chase.
Okay, with Chase.
So you had told me like during that conversation, like, oh, thank you for sharing that. And I was like, oh, no problem. And when I got to the car, this is on me, not on you. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, I thought about it like, oh, that was helpful. But then I thought to myself, well, that's what you were supposed to do. Right? So where I was able to leave you with something, emotionally, I shut myself out of that moment of like, oh, you did something good. But that goes back to that, I was taught to shut down my emotions as a child. So now that I'm learning to emotionally regulate, it's like, oh, that's helpful. Did do something. So back to what you were saying, like it does boost confidence even within your own self, and then it helps that other person. Like there's a healthy exchange of like, I'm feeding you, you're feeding me, type situation.
And that's why I pursue, or I'm kind of pursuing, connection and communication, is because you can communicate without doing that, but it just adds a little bit extra, and that's where I guess I would say the connection comes in, because just adding that little bit, it sparks a little bit of a deeper connection, because you're sharing something. When those moments happen, you're putting emotion behind it.
Yeah.
So that emotion, you're connecting with that other person, whatever frequency, if you want to think about it that way. And then you're connecting together in an emotional level, and that's where you really, when you take something in at an emotional level, not just an intellectual level, you remember it.
Yeah.
And it impacts you differently. So it's like, that's pretty important in my opinion, because you can communicate together and you can have good communication, but then when you put a little bit of emotion behind it, then it lasts. Sorry, I just whispered that, then it lasts.
I was about to say, what you whispering?
Yeah, I didn't mean to whisper. Chase is trying to sleep. We're trying to be quiet.
No. Now you're gonna make me whisper, low-key.
But my throat's kind of sore, honestly. I don't know why. It's probably this bang.
It could be, or you don't be trying to get sick, bro.
I'll be fine. I take vitamin C.
Don't be trying to get nobody sick. But no, I get it 100%. And that's in community, which is one of the biggest things, like right now, like God has had me in studying and focusing, is like community. Every scripture, it seems like no matter where I go, what church I attend, it's about community. And I'm like, okay, God, why do you want me, of all people, to deal with community? But it's the lack of community that we've had, the lack of conversation, the lack of unity that comes with community, and the lack of conversation and development that is missed. Nowadays, that's more present. Like, I've been studying Genesis and why, like, all of the reasons that God could have told Abraham to leave his father's house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would God tells us to honor our mother and father? Why would he tell him to leave his father's house? But when I think about like it in depth, and then I look at the life of others who have had similar experiences as myself,
Mm-hmm.
it makes a lot of sense when you have, say, a person looking at growing, looking at having a connection with God, looking at them thriving for purpose. And then you look at Abraham's father, whose name is Terah in the Bible, which means delay, which is so weird. And Abraham didn't have children till later on in life, so even his
Mm-hmm.
childbearing years were delayed. Like, it's weird when you read the Bible and you look at the definitions of names and what they mean. But how Abram's then Abraham's father was an idol worshiper and an idol maker. He made idols with his hands for people to worship outside of God.
Abraham's father.
Mm-hmm. So now you look at how God is leading Abraham to a proper marriage, a covenant with him. And then you look at Abraham's father, who's worshiping other idols and creating idols, which is devil worship, if
Mm-hmm.
we look at it, and how the correlation in the communication within the family could not have been healthy, because there's no way that you can follow God and then have your father, whose house you're in conflict and you're in war nine
Right.
times out of 10. And then looking at it from Matthew, I got to figure out the exact scripture and I will send it to you. But God tells us, where's it, Mark? I did not come to bring peace but a sword. I come to turn a son against a father against a son, a daughter against a mother against a daughter-in-law against a mother-in-law. A man won't be safe in his own home. And then he runs down the list of, if you're willing to please these people, just in paraphrasing, outside of doing what God asked you to do, you're not fit for God.
Hmm.
So there's no way that Abraham would have been able to thrive in a community with God the way he needed to in that household, because it would have been contention. It would have been a lack of communication. It would have been arguing because you're on two different foundations.
Right. That makes sense.
So when I look at the strife that a lot of people in our community have gone through from a mental health standpoint and from a family and relational standpoint, that lack of, like you said, communication and really feeding in, um, validating a person without necessarily validating them, if that makes sense, and allowing them to do the same for you, like, that builds a stronger community. And there's, like, even within that, there's no, like, even from a biblical standpoint, there's no, in that household there could have been no communication. It could have been no real foundational, like, principle of love, which is what's missing in our communication in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you can't communicate effectively, or you can't have a healthy community without healthy conversation and healthy communication. It doesn't work out.
And to add to that, healthy communication comes from being able to express your thoughts to the best extent that you can. So articulation is very, very important.
Very much so.
And to say what you think instead of forming your words a certain way,
Yeah.
it takes the willingness. In my the way that I learned it is from Jordan Peterson, but you have to be willing to go on an adventure. Essentially, you have to be willing to be honest and have faith, because if you're speaking your mind, truly what you're thinking, you have to be willing to let go of the outcome.
Yeah.
And that kind of communication is different than I'm forming my words to make you think what I want you to think.
Yeah.
Because I lived a life of doing that very briefly
Mm-hmm.
in a marriage that I had, right? Because I would form words carefully to satisfy her needs, quote unquote, but also keep me at ease.
Yeah.
And it was forming the words. I was forming the words and I wasn't using the truth.
Yeah.
Whereas everything started getting better in my life in general. I mean, it got worse before it got better, but
Yeah.
when I started being honest and having enough faith to speak my mind and speak the truth, or at least what I felt to be the truth. And that opens, not only does it free your heart and free your mind from the conflict and the confrontation inside of yourself, it also allows you to learn more because you're letting your truth out, your version of the truth, like, right, quote unquote, out into the world to be received, and then you're inviting other people to share their truth, and then you're communicating, and then in the process of you sharing your truth in this case, and me sharing my truth, is now two truths are coming together because you're saying what you believe to be true, and I'm saying what I believe to be true, and then in that process, both of our minds are now forming a new truth. If we communicate correctly, because then we're essentially, in this case, not violently obviously, but butting heads until we find something that we both agree on, and then that's forming a deeper connection, but it also is forming a new truth, essentially, a greater truth, right? And you can also look at this in the sense of, for the Bible at least, where two or more are gathered, God's presence is there, or something like that. I forget the exact
Where 2 or 3 are
verse.
gathered, he shall be in the midst. Some translations say, where 2 or 3 shall touch and agree, it shall be done, in the sense of whatever it is that's being asked for, working out.
So essentially, and you can use that in pretty much any sort of conflict or communication or event where more than one person is together, we're coming together with truth and we're amplifying the truth.
Yeah.
We're creating a bigger, a better truth.
Yeah.
So our little small truths are combining together, raising, and now we're searching up a higher truth. And then we can take that into another situation, and that's how essentially information is gained, right? Books, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those truths are put into these books, and I'm putting this together as I'm talking, but these truths are put together in these books, right? Personal health books, or personal growth books, essentially, is what I'm talking about. And those are given to you, and then you're taking your truths, what you believe, and you're challenging this book. And as you're reading the book, if you're not ignorant, you take in the information, and now, oh my goodness, you're learning more. And the more you're learning, the better, the bigger the truth. So then you're changing your mind's shifting, and now there's a new truth. And then the more you read, or the more you learn, or the more the information you're taking in new things. So some people have such a twisted view of the truth because maybe they lie all the time. But if you lie consistently, you become a pathological liar, which means you're so convinced of the lie that you believe it's true. And then that becomes your truth.
Yeah.
And then that leads to detriment.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously not where you want to go, but then those truths battle, in those situations. And it's just a constant battle. That's how I kind of see a perspective.
I get you. Because, like, so weird. My grandma used to tell me, it's always your truth, their truth, and then the actual truth. And then, like, she used to tell me all the time, like, in order to process what the actual truth is, you have to look at you, they have to look at them, you have to converse about it. But then when you're building a relationship, say between a husband and a wife, they have the conversation, but then they take it to the Word of God to see what God says about it, which gives us the ultimate broad spectrum of what that truth is in that moment. Like, and this might be a bad analogy to use. Hopefully I can explain this properly. You hear people like get a divorce, right? But then you'll always have one person say, well, the divorce was because this person did this. And then the other person says, well, the divorce was because of this. But the actual divorce is because neither one of this person, like if we look at it from a biblical standpoint, this person had dealt with the spirit of Leviathan. This person was just out here doing God knows what. So you're extremely prideful. You're extremely shut off. And the Word of God could not work within the relationship because this person's dealing with the level of pride, which God tells you destruction comes before the fall, which is why the marriage ended up falling. And then this person in the relationship is not willing to be completely transparent about what they're dealing with. So now there's a lack of communication just being stopped altogether. But they don't realize that the reason that the relationship fail in some cases is because there was a lack of communication, but a lack of foundation on God.
Right.
Like if you look at it from, let's just say the old school, well thinking of marriage. But in order to, like taking it back to scripture, God tells us we should have conversations with him, right?
Yeah.
He also tells us we should confess our sins one to another and healing will take place. There has to be a level of healthy confrontation in communication sometimes to really figure out what's going on in that situation, which, like you said, is the ultimate truth. So it boils, like if I look at it from a biblical perspective, it's what are we not doing in the community to actually converse with one another?
Yeah. Where's the hiccup?
Where's the hiccup? And then what level of information do you have that I have? Like you said, with even books, like we take different pieces of information and we put out self-help books, or you have now like two different therapists are coming together to write a book on their experiences to figure out like what's the underlying issue in mental health, what's the underlying issue in depression, different things within the mental health that can be off. It's, I want to make sure I word this properly. It's that healthy, it's the, let's say, depending on context.
Yeah.
In some contexts, we can say the bigger truth is found when people are willing to take accountability for themselves in ways. Does that make sense? I don't think I'm articulating that correctly.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
It's so it's essentially you have to be willing to look inside yourself and see it.
Look inside. Yeah, you have to be willing to look inside of yourself. But you have to be willing to also be open to that wide viewpoint of another's person, to get to that truth that you're speaking of, or that we're speaking of. You have to be willing in yourself to put down that level of pride to really take in what they're saying.
Yeah, taking the other perspective.
To take in the other person's
Yeah, so you have to have your perspective.
Yeah.
You have to let that come out.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where you're speaking the truth. But you also have to be humble enough, right, per se, where you're able to take in the information that they're giving you, taking it in and actually listening, processing it, and then spitting that back out.
Yeah.
So then those two truths are coming together and then they're entangling, right? That's why you have that conversation.
Yeah.
And then it comes out, and that's how you're both elevating each other to a higher place.
To the higher place. Because I think, like, not even I think, when people are, say we have a confrontation, in order to get to the truth of the matter, I have to be willing to acknowledge the fact that, hey, I was a jackwagon towards you. Like,
I could be wrong.
Or I'm wrong in this. Like, because how you perceived things mentally is actually correct. Like sometimes in confrontation or confrontations, disagreements, there's never a resolve because it's that person dealing, as I spoke earlier, with that level of pride of like, no, I'm not. This is a you thing. And it becomes almost as a form of manipulation. Like you were saying, like there was a point in time before growth and healing took place where you would form your words in a way. We as people sometimes do that in conversations, but we don't say the words. Or we'll sit back and be like, no, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And we're allowing that other person to think that they're crazy when in all actuality it's almost like gaslighting. It's like a very subtle gaslight.
Yeah.
And we have to allow that dialogue. Like healthy communication. You and I and Chase in the gym. Had a good, decent, I don't even remember what all we talked about. Do you remember any of that?
It was a lot of
outside of the podcasting.
Yeah, it was a lot of family related.
A lot of family related stuff.
Growth is basically the foundation that we were on.
So community, I'll say community standpoint. I didn't know you from a can of paint.
From a
Figuratively,
what?
from a can of paint.
Okay.
Figuratively speaking, right? I would have walked past you, you would have walked past me, and we just would have been two different people of a different ethnicity in the same gym, being like, "Hey, bro, I'm going on about our business." Would have known nothing about Maverick.
If I didn't trip off those stairs.
The day before, absolutely, absolutely. Um, but we were able to share a level of. There was a genuine connection made there because of the fact we were willing to share each other's truths and the life lessons we went through. But there was a level of vulnerability there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
There was a
what allows
level
the
of
connection.
exactly. And so, like, when my grandma would be like, "Yeah, it's your truth, their truth, and the truth of God." When you look at the biblical perspective, or take the issues or confrontations, or even if it's, I'll say, healthy debates, like people feel like having a conversation where you disagree is unhealthy, and it's like, actually, no, that's the healthiest thing you can do.
No, that's why I named what we were originally going to
Yeah,
talk about, healthy confrontation.
yeah,
And that's what that sixth episode was about on the podcast that I spoke on like 8 months ago or something. It was healthy confrontation, because it's like confrontation, people look at it in a negative light. But it really doesn't have to be seen that way. It's just there's a conflict, and it needs to be resolved. So that's why I say healthy confrontation. And it was originally, for everyone listening, it was originally the topic that we were going to talk about, and then we just went on to something completely different.
different.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of got around to it a little bit, but
But
for the most part,
this
we've
is
just been talking about.
life. It's just
Yeah.
like a freestyle thing. But that's funny. God works funny. Like, God works mysteriously. Like, when He wants you to touch on something, you're gonna have a conversation about it, and it's gonna be completely unintentional. But it was that vulnerability that, if I can say, that stood out for me after our conversation, which it hit the next day. Because I was like, as I told you before, I normally tend to shut down my emotions. So even if I do something good, I don't.
Process.
I do now.
Yeah.
I give myself kudos for it in the moment when I catch it. It's like, no, you did something well. You pat yourself on the back. It's okay to tell yourself you did a good thing. Sometimes you do bad things because you don't hear that you do good things good enough. Like, that's why I refuse to tell children they're bad. I don't. You're like, parents do that all the time. You're bad. No, you're not. They're misinformed and they're ill taught. It's nothing wrong with the child. It's something wrong with the person who's holding the child. So what's your issue? That's how it,
Yeah.
that's how I deal with parents. People get irritated with me. That's how I deal with my own parents, and they're like, "You don't think that was hard?" No, because if I don't tell them the truth, they will never have the relationship with me that they really have said they wanted their entire lives. We don't communicate. So if we're going to communicate, I got to tell you what I'm feeling. And sometimes it's not the child, it's the parent. And sometimes it is the child.
Yeah.
Because
but
children,
you learn from their parents. Your voice. There's someone or a saying or a quote or something I heard a while back, is the inner voice in your head is formed by your parents. Because
yeah,
what else? What other information are you taking? Unless maybe you're super hard-headed and independent and you think for your own self.
Yeah.
But for the most part, and even then, the beginning of your life or the beginning of your development of your brain, you're taking in what your parents are saying to you, and your inner voice is formed kind of by that, because that's what you have.
that's what you have, and that's what you're used to hearing about yourself. Children don't know who they are. I
mean,
think that even
they're just existing, like in the purest sense, like they're just being what their brains, because they don't know traumas.
they don't know. Yeah, at least they shouldn't know traumas. They should,
Yeah.
especially too early. And there's some traumas that us as humans should never have to experience.
Right, I agree.
But in that way, it's your communication. How you communicate to your child about their actions is who they believe they are at some point in time. And we have to be really careful about that. I've heard one of the deepest sayings that hit hard, but it hit hard to me because I've been in a place of healing. It's a lot easier to raise healthy children than it is for a grown man to heal. It's easier to raise healthy children than it is to heal a broken man. Because normally, in this, even in the perspective of children, because sometimes parents don't realize that they break their children's heart more times than the law should allow.
Mm-hmm.
But for a man or a woman who has had nothing but traumatic experiences or who have felt abandoned and alienated and alone, have to heal 20 plus years of their life, depending on how old they are in some cases,
Right.
before they're able to actually live a healthy quality of life of really knowing who God created them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same way with parents. Like when I look at, even with my nieces and nephews, I don't tell them they're bad. I don't tell any of my godchildren, any of the babies around me, they're bad. They're not bad. When God created man, he looked at them and said that they were good. When God created this baby, God knew that this child and this human being would have a purpose that he created them for. That is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for me to ever tell a child they're bad or they're mischievous, because the power of life and death is in the tongue. Those that love it will eat the fruit thereof. That's biblical. What you say will come into fruition. I don't want to speak that my child is bad.
Right.
I don't want to speak that my child is mischievous. That means I'm going to have a hard time when they become older. And if they're hearing that about themselves, and there is no context behind it. They don't know the standpoint that you're coming from. Like some children are genuinely children can be cruel. But it's because most children don't have a censor cap.
Yeah, they're just honest.
Some children are explorative. Like
Yeah.
they like to explore. That's not them being mischievous. They're just naturally inquisitive. So you're taking a very good quality that God has given this child and you're putting that they're mischievous or that you're putting a negative connotation around it instead of giving them confrontation or giving them context. Hey baby, Daddy really doesn't like when you do this, because when you're going through drawers and you're going through things, I feel like you might find something that might harm you. So it would be better for you just to kind of back off. Give them context. Or my child, and my mom used to tell me all the time, you talk too much. So then I started shutting up.
Right.
My dad, men ain't supposed to cry. I'm 8. I'm supposed to cry. That's the universal sign that something is wrong with your child. Mm-hmm. So when I stopped crying and I stopped telling them things, they didn't know that bad things happen. But then those bad things I took on as myself. So I'm thinking that I cry too much or I complain too much, but that translated, and I'm not supposed to, but that translated to, one, I'm not supposed to deal with this emotion, which is unhealthy for a human being to grow up. But then it also means that I'm less of a man because I did this.
Right. And I'm not who I'm supposed to be.
Exactly.
When exactly you're being yourself.
Who I'm supposed to be at the age of 8. If you have an 8-year-old that's not emotionally regulating or crying about something, when they experience a hardship, you have a child that's already shut down. Mm-hmm. Something's already wrong. Because your children should be telling you what's going on. They should be exemplifying emotions. Just like you hear 16 and 17-year-old girls and boys randomly crying. They're going through puberty. They're going through hormonal shifts. They're supposed to. Yeah, that's normal. So when it comes down to like that child thing and the environment you live in, what people say about you as a child is who you think that you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And your inner voice will conflict can conflict with you as you grow and who you become, like later on in life. Like that's part of the healing. Like it's hard for a person, which is why I identify with that statement that she said. Her name is Tiffany Montgomery. It is difficult to heal that aspect of a person's mind when that's what they've heard for 25 years of their life.
That's been solidified.
Yeah. It's been their foundation.
Exactly. And it's hard to tear it down and then rebuild, which a lot of people I'm sure will understand that, because you do. If you're going to change your life, you have to be able to break it down right to the source. And that's where a lot of therapy, that ideally it's where a lot of people that are in therapy would go. You go down to the source. What specifically happened to make you act or react this way? And then what can we do to help change the perspective that you have on that? Not to change it, but to change the perspective, the story that you tell yourself. Because if you can change the story, the meaning behind the situation,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start really taking control of that. And that's really important, because if you refuse to take control of it, then it has
Mm-hmm.
control over you.
Yeah.
Whereas if you choose to take control of that situation and try and essentially change the story that you tell yourself, which is something that's taught in Tony Robbins' stuff,
Yeah.
is the story is your decision. You put you put whatever meaning behind the situation that you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to choose to be the victim? Are you going to choose to take ownership? Are you going
Mm-hmm.
to choose to change
Yeah.
that story, the meaning of that story behind? So something happened horribly to you. Are you going to choose to let that define you? Or are you going to choose to let it be a reason you succeed? So completely same story,
Yeah.
different perspective. And that's why there's some quotes or some people that talk about, well, both of these people had alcoholic parents. One became an alcoholic and beat his children. The other one
Mm-hmm.
became super, super successful. They both had the same situation.
Yeah.
They, but they both chose to
Look
give
at it differently.
themselves a different story behind it.
Yeah. And that's where I love being able to be in a place of working in Christian mental health counseling, because it gives me the ability to help people see the perspective of what God said about them, not what other people said about them.
Yeah,
which is a truth that a lot of people don't get. Like, now that I'm understanding who God created me to be, mm-hmm. and why it's important for me to have that communication with him, I can be like, oh man, like, I'm not a complete F up. I'm not a complete like nuisance. And to be able to help other people see that, because God's perspective of who we are will drive us down, will bring us and elevate us where thinking about the opposite or the negative conversation or the lie that we've been told about ourselves from the outside forces, from childhood growing up. Killing that allows me to actually function how God wants me to. It's like same with you. Like we've had, particular conversations just about your growth and where you're going, like how you're communicating and what being in a church community has done for you. We touched on it at the gym. And it's like, that's what we need to see. Like, we're not, where we may have felt abandoned, we never were abandoned, because God was always with us. The people, for sake of conversation, quote, may have made us feel abandoned.
Yeah.
But what God said is, I will never leave you nor forsake you. What God said is, I will use the bad that happened to you and the bad that you've done for your good. So that's giving, like going back to that example, two people have an alcoholic parent. One chose to become abusive and alcoholic. The other looked at the other perspective. One looked at it as, God is going to use this for my greater good. One looked at it as, this is just who I am, because this is what I come from. So it's being able to, as you said, shifting your mind frame to looking at it differently. Is that easy?
No.
No.
Not at all.
Not at all. Not at all. Like, when people, it's so many people that walk around and be like, I want to be healed. Baby, keep that thought. Tell me how you feel when you go to the therapist and they finally hit that scab and they just open it up and let all that infection that's been brewing under it open, like, just air out. Like, because that's what I look at healing sometimes as. It's painful. Healing isn't always,
You gotta tear away the parts that are bad,
bro,
before you can start the healing.
bro. I told my pastor, I'll never forget, men's ministry that I'm in. I love Pastor BK. He's amazing. He said, you got to tell God, when you're ready for healing, you got to be honest with God, but you also have to be prepared about what happens afterwards. Mm-hmm. Because from a mental health standpoint, when people start going through healing, if they've dealt with addictions in the past, it's easy for them to relapse and go back into that, because now they're dealing deeper into a situation that drove them to that dependency in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's good to have a strong community. So he was like, you need to pray, ask God to heal you. So I went in my prayer closet. I said, I'm gonna fast and I'm gonna pray. I'm sick of this. Like, I'm tired of waking up this way. Tired of waking up depressed, tired of waking up with suicidal thoughts and ideations, the first, like, questioning my own life. Mm-hmm. I was like, God, I need you to rip off every band-aid, every scab that's unhealed. Let the infection, like, I need you to heal me internally. What I did not know is that God was going to heal me. But in order for him to heal me, he was going to have to put me in the midst of some of those things so I could apply the word of God to it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the longest 2 weeks of my life, and I dealt with one issue. And after I thought I was done with that issue and I went back into therapy, my therapist said, so we need to touch on this again. What I thought would have taken a couple of weeks to get over, which was me learning to forgive somebody in a parental form. 8 to 9 months was before I could actually be like,
Doesn't bother you anymore.
God, you right.
Yeah.
You right. It's one bigger than me. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Because unfortunately, we learn how to do things from the previous generation. And if don't nobody stop and say, this doesn't make sense.
That's what he said on the cross, right? Before you. That's what Jesus said on
Yeah.
the cross, right?
And I've literally had to sit in moments and deal with that. But the one thing that made it easier for me to start healing that situation is one thing that God showed me is your abuser doesn't necessarily know what pain they're causing you. And sometimes your abuser doesn't even know they're abusing you.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So that phrase like sits with me now, like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Because they really don't mean to tear what would feel like your spirit apart. Some people. Now that you do have those manipulative Bettys that decide to ride with Satan, and that's their business. That's your business. Just don't come for me. Because now that I know where I sit with God, and I know that he don't play with me, it's very detrimental to your health for you to come at me wrong. That's just how I look at it. Like, if I'm gonna stand on the promises of God and the word of God, I'm standing on everything. So when he says that vengeance is his, if you come for me, vengeance is his. I'm just gonna pray for you and ask him to have mercy on you. Like, I'm at a point to where I'm praying spicy prayers like David. Like, let's cut the head off some things. Like, let's go for it. But, and I say that humbly. Like, it's not, I'm not sitting there praying for nobody, for God to come at nobody. Like, no, have mercy on them. But that's what set in that moment. And it took me waking up one morning and like, God, they don't even know. I'm going to believe that because of the sin that took place in the Garden of Eden, just like Adam and Eve didn't know as parents what their sin would do, my parents, my uncles, my aunts, my aunties, and those before me didn't know either. Now I have two decisions. I can actively choose to forgive you, which is a daily thing sometimes. Forgiving people is a daily thing because forgiveness is an action. It's not a feeling. So I can actively every day forgive you and choose to say, God, I resolve them of this debt because you said forgive your debtors, or I asked you to forgive me as I forgive my debtors. That's forgive those who trespass. Forgive me for trust. Lord Jesus, I always get it mixed up. Forgive me. Forgive me of my trespasses as I forgive those who trespass against me.
There you go.
It's a tongue twister, especially when you're thirsty. But that's conditional. God is only going to forgive me as much as I forgive those who trespass against me, because I've nailed Jesus to the Christ myself. Like, I've come against God and persecuted him myself with my actions and going against his word. So in the same way, I have to actively forgive those people. It ain't easy. But doing so has given me a freedom to not feel like I have to do things that I did in the past. And I think that's what a lot of things, like healthy conversation, comes into play, where we are able to, help other people get through circumstances. And it's going to be a lot of things for forgiveness. I started having less mental and mind battles from the enemy when I was able to say, I forgive you.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I have days where I get upset about something that happened, and it's like I forgave them about it. If God asks me to feed them today, I'm just gonna send them the money and just say, Jesus, okay, thank you, and go on about my day. I may not even want to do it, but it's not a feeling; it's an action. Forgiveness is never. Yeah.
It's an interesting perspective on it. So I wrote that down. Mm-hmm. The next topic I think we should go over is forgiveness, I think.
Ooh, so I'm still in that. I'm working on that.
Yeah, I think we should I think that's a good place. I think this is a good place to stop too. But I think that would be the next topic we talk about, because I have a couple things that I want to touch on with that. Mm-hmm. But I don't have the right words for it right now. And I'm also, it's like 10:30. So I need to get you home and everything. But anyways, thank you for coming on. I'm definitely going to have you on. You're going to be a regular for sure. Other than that, thank you guys for watching. This guy, his name is Terance. He goes by Blue.
Coach Blue.
Forgot to introduce him in the beginning. We just kind of started talking. Thank you guys for joining in, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Over and out.